Daniel, floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about what it's like to build an open and repairable laptop. Yes, who am I? I am Daniel Schäfer. I'm a system software engineer at Framework. I'm German and I live in Taiwan. And what is Framework? We are a new computer company, barely 4 years old, and we're still a very small team, just over 40 people, located in the US, in Taiwan, and one person in Canada. And we are trying to make good laptops and trying to change the industry by doing so, by being a good example. Yes, we try to have more repairable, open, sustainable, user-owned and customizable laptops. Currently, we have two laptops, basically. The one I'm currently using, the one they were using for the keynote yesterday, the Framework 13. And we're coming out this year, end of this year, or it will ship early next year with a bigger version, the Framework 16. And I brought a prototype today, so later you can come check it out. It's still an early version, so some things are not super smooth, but we're getting it ready. We actually have more products than two, but basically two sizes that each are their own series. Repairable. Why do we want to have a repairable laptop? Or what does that mean even? It means that it can be repaired. Users can repair it. They can figure out what's wrong. They can diagnose the issues, and they are able to fix it themselves. Or if they don't have the skill, they can have somebody else who has more experience with it help them fix it. And if you repair it, then you don't have to throw away your computer that's still good, and you can avoid e-waste. By doing so, you can keep it for longer, and you can maintain it. This is especially great for big organizations who have a ton of laptops, and when something breaks, they want to keep the value of what's still there and just fix the piece that's broken. Yeah, so you can end up saving money and saving the planet. Then how do we make a laptop repairable? First of all, if there's an issue, you need to, like I said before, you need to figure it out, and you need to be able to solve it. To do so, we have published lots of guides for repairing pretty much every piece of the laptop. And to find the guides, you can look at the piece that's broken, and we have a QR code and everything. And if you scan it, it will link to a guide online that helps you fix it. In addition to that, if you can't figure it out, we have good support. We do answer every support request that comes in. And if that's not enough, or if you have something that you want to ask other framework owners, we have a community forum where you can discuss with each other. Yes, so all parts are user serviceable. If there's anything wrong, you can exchange it. For example, recently I wanted to change my keyboard layout to a different language, and you could change the entire front plate of the laptop. You can easily take it off. But then I realized I did this, and the fingerprint reader has the fingerprint stored inside it. So if I change this, I have to re-enroll my fingers. So I just unscrewed the fingerprint reader, put it in the new cover, and yeah. Right, not only are all parts serviceable, but if something's broken or you lost something, you can buy every part from us. Big things like the mainboard, the display, the keyboard, and even little things. If you lost a screw, if your hinge is broke, or if you lost a small cable while disassembling, maybe you disassembled on the train, and lost the internal cable to the display, you can get everything from us. And we do have full schematic available, not to everyone because of NDAs with partners, but if you're a repair shop, we can sign an NDA with you and you can get a full schematic to do all kinds of board level repairs. Right, how do you design a repairable system? Many products, they're glued shut, or some pieces are glued, but we don't do that. We avoid it. And I have to be honest, there's one part, the Wi-Fi antenna is stuck to the back of the lid, but you don't really need to apply it and put it back. So if you just get a new antenna, you stick it and it's fine. For everything else, we have screws, and if you buy the laptop, it will come with a screwdriver. So you're ready to go, and we do want you to open it. Right, so we have just 2 screw heads. You can flip it around here, and there's no special type of screws. If you lose a screw, we have 3 screws in the case as a backup. And many of the screws, they are captive, they don't fall out. So right now I have my laptop unscrewed, but the screws, they are still stuck in place. And to hold things together while you're taking it apart, or some things, they don't need screws, they're just stuck together with a magnet. So for example, the display bezel is just stuck together with a magnet. While you're taking it apart, you're going to disconnect things and reconnect things. So oftentimes you might break the connectors. That's why we made sure to use connectors that can handle unplugging and replugging. Sometimes internally we have competitions at the office to see who can swap a mainboard the fastest. So they can really take a beating. And to make it repairable, you don't want to have to exchange like a giant part that has many subcomponents. If only one of them is broken, you want to exchange only the one component. So for example, for the audio port, it's on a separate breakout board, which you can exchange separately from the main board. And the ports on the sides, HDMI and so on, they're on separate expansion cards that you can hot swap. Right, and even more, other parts are also socketed, which many modern laptops don't do anymore, like the Wi-Fi card, the RAM and SSD. You can just buy off-the-shelf parts and upgrade them, replace them. So what if you upgrade a part? If you buy a new mainboard, what do you do with the old one? We don't want you to throw it away. If you just upgrade and the old one is perfectly fine, you can reuse it. For example, the motherboard, you can put it in a case. You can just use the motherboard on its own. Either on its own, or you 3D print a case. We have the design online, or you can buy a case from us made by a Cooler Master and use it as a computer, basically. To do that, there's a power button directly on the mainboard, which you can use to power down. And the community has taken this very far. They have put it in many enclosures. They have built an all-in-one computer, like a computer with a built-in screen where you just plug in the power and you can use it like this. Or somebody took a touch screen and 3D printed a case and basically made a tablet out of it. Used all of the other components that we have, just exchanged the screen and case. Or even a cyber deck where somebody has just a mechanical keyboard in a box and the mainboard inside. Yeah, lots of other things, like you can use the screen by itself. You can get an adapter to connect it to any other computer, or the keyboard also. Somebody made an adapter that makes it usable as a USB keyboard. Here, this is the case that you can use for your mainboard if you want to use it standalone. You just plug in a USB-C power adapter and Ethernet or keyboard, a screen. Okay, so when trying to make it repairable, there are some troubles. It's not the average design. Because we have so many magnets, magnets and electricity, they sometimes don't interact well with each other. With high frequency, they can make parts vibrate and cause audible noise, which is not nice. So sometimes we have to tweak the design or tweak the firmware to change some frequencies to avoid annoying noises. And because we want to make sure that you can keep upgrading year after year, we have to be really careful when making changes, when making improvements, that everything still fits. If you, for example, use a new mainboard in an old chassis or an old mainboard in a new chassis, we are making it compatible both ways. Right, so we have to make sure the connectors are the same, they stay in the same place, they have the same pin out. And the shape, of course, has to be the same and fit. Because we have so many parts to the laptop that we sell individually, it's a big challenge logistically, instead of just selling one laptop, but lots of small parts. And while repairable sounds great and excites lots of people, especially in this room, but if I go to a regular person and say, look how easy it is to take apart the laptop, like I just did, you lift off the cover. Many people, they get scared. They're like, I don't want to open my laptop. I'm afraid I will break it. Even if I tell them that it's super easy and you won't break anything, it scares them. So it's best to tell most people it's just a regular laptop. Don't worry about it. Just keep it shut. Yeah, because our mainboard you can use by itself. You don't have to use it in the chassis. This is a special design. Most mainboards can't do this, so we have to have some firmware and EE changes to make this work. Especially because it can run without a battery. One thing in the firmware we have to change is if the PD controller is the power delivery controller. We have one on each side for the 2 ports on each side, and they have firmware. And when you update them, but you run the board from that port, like the board is powered from this port, but you're trying to update the firmware of the component that powers the board. How do you do it? Well, you can't. But because we have 2 sides, we have a mechanism that tells the user first update the one that is not powering the board, and then you have to plug it in the other side, and then we can update the other one. Okay. Like I said, we have forwards and backwards compatibility. Now, with the new 16-inch, we have basically 2 lines that are compatible within each other. And our 13.5-inch has already had 5 different mainboards with full compatibility. So the chassis I have here, there's 5 different mainboards that you can put inside, and that work perfectly fine. The only exception is we have a Chromebook variant, and some of the components like the touchpad and the camera, they have slightly different firmware. But you can change the firmware to make them work. So if you bought a laptop that we sold in 2021, you can keep your old chassis, keep your old battery, screen, and so on. And it supports every update that we have released so far. For example, we have released a new screen that is matte instead of glossy. We have released stronger hinges, because some people complained the screen wobbles too much. Lots of new mainboards. A battery that has better chemistry, so it is the same size, but it supports higher capacity. speakers that are also the same shape, of course, same connector, but they are a little bit louder. And the screen bezel, you can change very easily, just magnet. And we have different colors for that. Right, tons of upgrades, the ones I listed. And like I said, also different keyboard languages. For example, recently we started selling in Taiwan. If you want a keyboard with traditional Chinese, you can change it now. We also released more expansion cards. If you're not familiar, those are the ones on the side, the ports. The main board just has USB-C, but if you need HDMI, DisplayPort, microSD, and so on, you use expansion cards. And we have released upgraded versions that use less power, and we have released more expansion cards, like Ethernet expansion cards, and they're compatible with all systems. On top of that, there are many potential upgrades that we might or might not do. So there could be displays with different refresh rates or resolutions, maybe a better camera, different kind of touchpad, RGB keyboard perhaps. Lots of people are asking for like a ThinkPad nub instead of a touchpad, or in addition. I can't say what we're working on right now, but some of these things are coming. Right, second one is open. We want to be open in every sense of the word. We sell hardware, and after you buy it, it's your hardware. You should be able to do whatever you want with it. You can run any operating system you like. We support Linux, and we support Windows. Other operating systems also probably work too. Yeah, so not just you can do whatever you want, but to know what you can do, we published a lot of documentation about what the hardware can do, how it works, and we published source code for a lot of the firmware. And we encourage you to tinker with the laptop, to take it apart, or to even make your own modules. Okay, what have we published so far? We have published the interface specifications of the mainboard, of the connectors, of all of the modules. So if you want to reuse any module, like the display, you can make your own adapter, make your own 3D printed case. For some, we have sample 3D print CAD files, like for the mainboard case or for the display. And for the 16-inch, we have some electrical sample designs for replacing the keyboard. And firmware, we have some open source firmware, like the embedded controller, which is the one that controls the keyboard, the power management, and the backlight. It is already open source, and it's based on Chromebooks EC firmware, which is already really mature. So we got a lot for free, and we are very grateful to the Chromebook team. On the new 16-inch, you can, let me go back to the picture. Bad idea. You can hot swap the keyboard and the touchpad. So basically everything on top is a USB device. The keyboard is basically just a regular USB keyboard. And that means it needs to run its own firmware. And the firmware for this and for other modules we made is fully open source and already published. Right. Specifically about firmware, 2 weeks ago I gave a talk about all of the open firmware and customizations you can make at the Open Source Firmware Conference. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. That's especially interesting because it's a good way to get started with firmware. Firmware is quite intimidating, but if you want to get started, you can do it with a keyboard, and there's really nothing you can break that can go wrong. You can always recover from it. The embedded controller would be very scary to get started with, because if there's something that you do wrong with the power management, you could damage things or break your laptop. What kind of troubles have we had making it open? Lots of vendors, they choose one Linux or Windows, but we want and we need to support both, and it's almost double the effort. And a lot of partners or vendors, they're focused on Windows, and to make them support Linux, it takes some pushing, and some things we have to do ourselves. The expansion cards, they are basically adapters, like what we've got hanging around here, and operating systems don't expect adapters to be plugged in always, and mainboard designs. So we had to make some changes to make them use less power than they would usually. For example, the audio expansion card, it detects if there's a cable plugged in, and if there isn't, it will just not be powered at all. So even the operating system can't see there's anything. For the DisplayPort expansion card, we changed the firmware to do a similar thing, to detect if there's a cable, and then change the behavior to actually not to make the card use less power, but to use the mainboard less power. Similar with the HDMI card, there's also firmware update, but it needs some hardware changes. So you can either buy a new card from us, or we published a guide to rework it, but it needs some tiny soldering. So if you're comfortable, you can do that. If not, you can find a friend that can do it, or you can just buy the improved card from us. On top of that, the PD controller that I mentioned earlier, we made some changes in that firmware to detect which expansion card is connected, and if there's something connected to the card, and to make it turn off some components in the mainboard, and to make them use less power. Right, the framework 16, because it's so modular, because you can just take off some modules like the keyboard and the touchpad. It's a lot of moving parts, so it's quite a mechanical challenge to make it sturdy, not flimsy. Especially with the speaker, because if there's any flimsy part, the speaker is going to make it vibrate, and that's going to cause annoying noises or bad sound quality. And because the keyboard is a USB keyboard, which is not normal. Usually USB keyboards, they're attached from the outside, and operating systems and their drivers, they don't expect a USB keyboard to be built into the laptop. So I'm still currently trying to figure out what the Windows driver is doing and why it doesn't enable some power savings. Linux compatibility. It's not that difficult to make a laptop that has all components work well on Linux. You just need to choose components that already have support. For example, many laptops, the fingerprint reader doesn't work on Linux, but if you just choose one that has driver support already, it's fine. Okay, I don't have much more time. Let's go through these quickly. The silicon vendor helps us fix a lot of bugs. We had to make some hardware workarounds because there's a bug in the Linux kernel. We have some extra BIOS options for Linux. We released firmware on LVFS. For some components we had to port some LVFS drivers. We have some custom software to control the laptop. And yeah, we support the user to run whatever distribution they want. We have support for the users. We have a dedicated Linux support person who helps users install and figure out issues with the Linux installation. And we have installation guides for many distributions, because each of them may have separate ways to install the fingerprint software. And we do some internal Linux QA. Yeah, why do we do all this? We care. We care about the users. We care about the environment and technology. We want to make awesome technology because it's fun and it makes us proud. And like I said in the beginning, we want to set a good example for the industry and hope they can make similar designs in the future. And of course, it's also a bit selfish. If people can repair and upgrade, they will keep buying from us. If you can just upgrade your mainboard, you don't have to switch to a different laptop. Right, there's some things that we can do better. We have to make sure that we keep compatibility. We want to be even more open source firmware. Right. And some questions like, should we pre-install Linux? Which some people might want, but me personally, I think if I want Linux, I'm just going to install it myself. Yeah, if there's anything else, you can let me know. You can find me afterwards. I'd love to hear your feedback. All right.
Brilliant, thank you.